You can't outrun a bullet, but you try anyway. That's what being a combat medic teaches you. Men get hit and they scream for you. Doc. Doc. And you run toward the gunfire, toward the explosions, toward the place everyone else is running from, because that's where the wounded are. That's where you're needed. In Hugh City, February 1968, I ran toward gunfire for 26 straight days. 26 days of urban combat. 26 days of watching Marines die in my arms. 26 days that destroyed whatever illusions I had about war or heroism or my ability to save anyone. My name is Hospitalman Third Class David Martinez, Navy corpsman attached to the Marines. Born in Los Angeles, 1947. Mexican-American family. My father worked construction. My mother cleaned houses. I was the first in my family to finish high school. Had dreams of going to college, becoming something. Then I got drafted in 1966. I was 19. The war in Vietnam was escalating. They needed bodies. I was a body. That's how it worked. I volunteered for Navy corpsman training. Thought it would keep me off the front lines. Thought being a medic would be safer than being infantry. Thought I could serve without having to kill anyone. Thought I could make a difference by saving lives. All those thoughts were wrong. They trained us at Camp Pendleton. 4 months of learning emergency medicine, trauma care, how to treat gunshot wounds, shrapnel injuries, sucking chest wounds, burns, how to stabilize patients until they could reach real doctors. Good training, intensive, but nothing prepares you for the reality. In November 1967, they shipped me to Vietnam, assigned me to 1st Battalion, 5th Marines. Good unit, experienced. They'd been in country for months, seen heavy fighting, lost men. They needed a replacement corpsman. The Marines welcomed me, called me Doc from day one, told me they'd keep me safe, told me the corpsman was the most important person in the platoon, told me they'd die for me if necessary. I didn't understand what that meant. Not then. Would learn later. Would learn that Marines and their corpsmen develop a bond unlike anything else in the military. Would learn that they weren't exaggerating. That they really would die for me. That many of them would. I spent November through January on operations in the countryside, patrols, sweeps, occasional firefights. Treated my first combat casualties, gunshot wounds, booby trap injuries, heat exhaustion, malaria, lost a few men, saved a few. Started to understand what the job really was. Started to understand that I couldn't save everyone, that sometimes my best wasn't enough, that men would die despite everything I did. Started carrying that weight. By late January 1968, we were in Phu Bai, near the old imperial capital of Hue. Tet, Vietnamese New Year, was coming. There was supposed to be a ceasefire, stand down for the holiday. Everyone was relaxed, celebrating, thinking we'd have a few days of peace. January 30th, 1968. The Tet Offensive began. North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces launched coordinated attacks across South Vietnam. Dozens of cities and towns, thousands of troops, the biggest offensive of the war. Hue City was hit hard. The enemy took most of the city in the first hours, raised their flag over the citadel, dug in, turned the ancient capital into a fortress, held thousands of civilians hostage, prepared for a fight. The Marines were ordered to take it back, to retake Hue City, house by house, block by block, whatever it took. We moved into the city on February 1st. I'd been in country for 3 months. Thought I'd seen combat. Thought I understood what war was. Hue City would teach me I'd understood nothing. Urban combat is different. In the jungle, you can spread out, take cover in the vegetation. The fighting is confused, but there's space. In a city, everything is compressed. Close quarters, no escape, enemies everywhere. Civilians mixed with combatants. Ancient buildings and narrow streets that become kill zones. We entered Hue expecting to clear it in a few days. light resistance, quick operation. Get in, clear the enemy, get out. That's what command thought, what we all thought. We were so wrong. The enemy had thousands of troops in Hue, well armed, well positioned, fighting from prepared defenses in stone buildings that could withstand anything short of point-blank artillery. They weren't going to give up, weren't going to run. They'd come to Hue to make a stand, and we'd have to dig them out, building by building, room by room, fighting the kind of brutal, grinding urban combat that destroys everyone involved. That first day, February 1st, we took heavy casualties. The Marines advanced down a street and got hit from 3 directions: machine gun fire, RPGs, snipers. Men started falling, started screaming for me. "Doc! Doc! I'm hit!" I ran toward the gunfire, ran toward the wounded. Because that's what you do. That's what corpsmen do. Even when every instinct says run away, even when you know you might die, you run toward them because they're screaming for you, because they need you, because you're all they have. I reached the first wounded Marine. Gunshot to the leg, arterial bleed. He was losing blood fast. I applied a tourniquet, tried to stabilize him. Rounds were hitting all around us, concrete exploding, dust and debris everywhere. I worked while bullets flew, while men died, while everything descended into chaos. That's when I learned what Hue would be. That's when I understood this wasn't like anything before. This was urban hell. This was house-to-house fighting against an enemy that wouldn't quit. This was 26 days of the worst combat the Marines would see in the entire war, and I'd be there for all of it, running toward gunfire, trying to save men who were already dying, watching the city destroy us piece by piece, day by day, casualty by casualty. That first Marine I treated, Lance Corporal Johnson from Ohio, I saved him, got him evacuated. He survived, went home. I thought that meant something, thought that was what the job would be. Save them, send them home, make a difference. But Johnson was one of the lucky ones. Most of them weren't so lucky. Most of them died no matter what I did. And I'd spend the next 26 days learning that lesson over and over, learning that in Hue City, death had the advantage, and all I could do was try to slow it down. The fighting in Hue was unlike anything the Marines had trained for. We'd prepared for jungle warfare, ambushes, booby traps, hit-and-run tactics. Hue was none of that. Hue was World War II-style urban combat, clearing buildings, fighting room to room, facing an entrenched enemy with excellent fields of fire and prepared positions. Every window was a potential sniper position. Every door a potential ambush. Every corner a death trap. The casualties came constantly, not in waves, not all at once, just constantly. A sniper would hit someone. An RPG would catch a squad crossing a street. A machine gun would open up from a building we thought was clear. All day, every day, men falling, men screaming, men dying. My job was to keep them alive long enough to evacuate them, to stabilize them, to stop the bleeding, to treat the shock, to give them morphine for the pain, to do whatever I could with my aid bag and my hands and my inadequate training for wounds that should have required a hospital. But we were blocks from any aid station, miles from any hospital. And the only way to get wounded out was to carry them through streets under fire, through kill zones, through places where the enemy waited to kill anyone who moved. Sometimes we couldn't evacuate them. Sometimes the fire was too heavy. Sometimes we had to keep wounded men with us, keep them in whatever building we'd captured, keep them alive or watch them die while we waited for a chance to get them out. There was a corporal named Mike Stevens, good Marine, tough guy. Got hit by an AK round through the abdomen on day 3. Intestinal perforation, internal bleeding. He needed surgery immediately, real surgery, hospital surgery. But we were pinned down, couldn't move, couldn't evacuate. I did what I could, bandaged the wound, gave him morphine, gave him plasma, kept him comfortable, Told him he'd be okay. He knew I was lying. We both knew. He was dying, and there was nothing I could do except sit with him, hold his hand, tell him lies about how he'd make it, how we'd get him out, how he'd be fine. He died after 6 hours, slow, painful, conscious until near the end. I was with him the whole time, watching him slip away, unable to save him, unable to do anything except be there while he died. That became the pattern. Men getting hit with wounds I couldn't treat in the field. Men needing surgeries I couldn't perform. Men dying slowly while I watched, while I tried, while I failed. The Marines kept fighting, kept pushing forward, building by building, block by block. The North Vietnamese fought for every room, every floor, every inch, used the ancient architecture, thick stone walls, narrow passages, multiple floors to their advantage. We'd clear a building, move to the next one, get hit from the building we'd just cleared. The enemy would filter back in, set up again, hit us from behind. We'd have to clear the same buildings multiple times, same streets, same blocks, taking casualties each time. The whole city became a meat grinder, chewing up Marines, spitting out bodies. We'd advance 50 yards and lose 5 men, take a building and lose 10, cross a street and lose 3. Every single movement cost blood. My aid bag was constantly empty, used up supplies faster than they could be replaced, ran out of bandages, ran out of morphine, ran out of plasma, had to scavenge from the dead, take medical supplies from corpses, use whatever I could find to treat the living. One day, maybe day 7, I'd lost track, we were clearing a building, 3-story stone structure, strong defensive position. The NVA had held it for days. We finally fought our way in. Brutal, close combat, room to room, floor by floor. A Marine, Private Rodriguez, kid from Texas, 19 years old, he got hit in the stairwell, gunshot to the chest, sucking chest wound. I could hear air whistling through the hole. He was drowning in his own blood, lungs collapsing. I needed to seal the wound, needed a chest seal, needed specific medical equipment. I'd used all mine days ago. Hadn't been resupplied. Had nothing except my hands and whatever I could improvise. I used his plastic magazine pouch, taped it over the wound as a makeshift chest seal. It wasn't sterile, wasn't proper, but it was all I had. I did everything I could, stabilized him enough to move, got him evacuated. He survived, barely, spent months in hospitals, lost part of a lung. But he lived. That should have felt like a victory. Instead, it just felt like luck. Like I'd gotten lucky that something improvised had worked. Like next time, I might not be so lucky. By day 10, the Marines were exhausted. We'd been fighting nonstop. 10 days of combat, 10 days of casualties, 10 days of death. Everyone was running on empty. No sleep, barely any food, constant stress, constant fear, constant loss. The corpsmen were breaking. One of the other docs, Navy guy named Phillips, he had a breakdown on day 8. Just stopped functioning, sat in a corner, stared at nothing, couldn't respond, couldn't treat wounded. They had to evacuate him, combat fatigue. Another casualty, though not from bullets. I kept going, not because I was stronger, just because I didn't have a choice. The Marines needed me, were depending on me, were screaming for me when they got hit. I couldn't break, couldn't stop, had to keep going, even when I was empty, even when I had nothing left, even when every wounded Marine felt like another failure, another person I couldn't save, another weight to carry. The fighting continued, day after day, week after week. The casualties kept coming, the Marines kept dying, and I kept running toward gunfire, kept trying to save them, kept failing more often than succeeding, kept carrying the weight of every face I couldn't forget. By the middle of February, Hugh City had become hell on earth. The fighting had been going on for 2 weeks, 2 weeks of constant combat, 2 weeks of casualties, 2 weeks of death in the ruins. The city itself was being destroyed. Artillery, airstrikes, naval gunfire, tank rounds, every weapon we had pounding the ancient capital into rubble. The beautiful architecture, centuries old, culturally significant, reduced to broken stone and collapsed buildings. History erased by high explosives. But the enemy wouldn't quit, wouldn't surrender. They'd fight from the rubble, from the ruins, from the bones of what used to be Hugh. They'd die in place rather than give up, and we'd have to kill them all. Every last one. Building by building, room by room, body by body. The casualties were overwhelming. We'd lost so many Marines. I'd stopped counting after 100, stopped learning names, stopped letting myself get attached, because attachment meant grief, and grief was a luxury I couldn't afford. But I couldn't completely shut it off, couldn't become cold enough to not care. So I existed in this terrible middle ground, caring enough to try, detached enough to function, but carrying the weight of every failure. The civilian casualties were worse. Hugh was a city, had been a city, populated. Thousands of civilians lived there. Many fled when the fighting started. Many couldn't. Many were trapped, caught between two armies, killed by crossfire, killed by artillery, killed by the war they didn't choose. We'd find them in the rubble, in the collapsed buildings, in the streets, old people, women, children, dead or dying, victims of a battle they had no part in. I'd try to help them when I could, when there was time, when I had supplies, but usually there wasn't. Usually I'd have to move past them, leave them, choose Marines over civilians, choose my people over strangers, make horrible calculations about who deserved help. There was a girl, maybe 8 years old. Found her in a building we'd just cleared. She'd been hit by shrapnel, multiple wounds, bleeding badly. She was crying, calling for her mother in Vietnamese, looking at me with eyes that knew she was dying. I tried to help, used what little supplies I had, tried to stop the bleeding, but she was too far gone. Too many wounds, too much blood loss. She died while I was working on her, died crying for her mother, died in a war she didn't understand. I had to leave her body there, had to move on, because more Marines were getting hit, because my job was to save them, not Vietnamese civilians. Because in war, you make choices, terrible choices, choices that haunt you forever. The Marines were changing. The constant combat was breaking them, not physically, though many were wounded, psychologically, spiritually. The endless killing, the endless dying, the endless horror of urban combat. It was grinding them down, making them hard, making them cold, making them into something other than the young men they'd been. I watched it happen. Watched guys who'd been decent kids become killers who felt nothing, who'd execute prisoners without hesitation, who'd burn buildings without checking for civilians, who'd lost whatever humanity they'd had and replaced it with pure survival instinct and rage. I understood it, felt it happening to me, too. The numbness, the coldness, the ability to step over bodies, enemy and civilian alike, without feeling much of anything. The war was stripping away our humanity, making us into machines, into weapons, into things that killed and died and felt nothing. There was a lance corporal named Jimmy Wilson, good kid, from Iowa. Talked about his girlfriend back home, showed everyone her picture, planned to marry her when he got back, had his whole life mapped out. He got hit on day 17, sniper round, through the neck, severed his carotid artery. He was dead before I reached him, bled out in seconds, never had a chance. I went through his pockets, looking for his dog tags, for personal effects to send home. Found the picture of his girlfriend, blood-soaked, ruined, just like him, just like all of us. I kept working, moved to the next casualty. Didn't have time to process, didn't have time to grieve. Just had to keep going, keep functioning, keep pretending I was still human enough to care. The enemy was suffering too. We'd see their dead, dozens of them, sometimes piled in buildings where they'd made their last stand. Young men, some teenagers, all dead, all destroyed by the meat grinder of Hugh. I didn't feel sympathy for them, couldn't afford to. They were trying to kill my Marines, trying to kill me, but I recognized what I saw in their faces, the same exhaustion, the same fear, the same knowledge that they were going to die in this cursed city. We were all being destroyed by Hugh, American, Vietnamese, North, South, everyone who fought there. The city was eating us all, grinding us into dust, leaving nothing but bodies and ruins and ghosts. By day 20, I was barely functioning, running on adrenaline and morphine I'd given myself to deal with my own injuries. Shrapnel wounds I'd gotten and barely treated because there were always Marines who needed help more than I did. I was exhausted, traumatized, hollowed out, but still moving, still responding when they called for me, still running toward gunfire, because that's what corpsmen do. We run toward the wounded, even when we're wounded ourselves, even when we've got nothing left, even when we know we're probably not going to save them. We try anyway, because they're calling for us, because we're all they have, because it's the only thing we know how to do. By late February, we'd been fighting in Hugh for nearly 4 weeks. 4 weeks of continuous combat, 4 weeks of casualties, 4 weeks of death. The Marines were spent, physically and mentally exhausted. We'd lost so many men, replaced them with new arrivals who'd get killed within days, sometimes hours. But we were winning, slowly, painfully. Building by building, we were pushing the NVA back, taking the city, paying for every yard with blood, but taking it. The enemy was weakening too, cut off from resupply, running low on ammunition, taking heavy casualties. But they were still fighting, still killing Marines, still making us pay for every inch. Command pushed for a final assault. Take the citadel, take the flag, end it. The Marines who were left, the ones still standing, still fighting, they prepared for what everyone knew would be the worst of it. The final push through the most heavily defended part of the city. I'd been in Hugh for 23 days by then, had treated hundreds of casualties, lost count of how many, lost count of how many died, lost count of everything except the next wounded Marine, the next scream for help, the next impossible task of trying to save someone who was already dying. My medical supplies were almost gone. Again. I'd been resupplied multiple times, but never with enough. Never with what I actually needed. I was using bandages made from torn clothing, using morphine scavenged from the dead, using whatever I could find to treat wounds that required real hospitals. The Marines knew I was doing the best I could with almost nothing. Never complained, never blamed me when I couldn't save them. Just trusted me, depended on me, called for me when they got hit, even knowing I probably couldn't help, even knowing they'd probably die anyway. That trust was the worst part, their faith in me, their belief that Doc could save them, that I'd make it okay, when I knew that I couldn't, that most of them would die despite everything I did, that their trust was misplaced, that I was failing them over and over. The final assault began on February 24th. Heavy fighting. The NVA fought like they knew this was the end, fought with everything they had, made us pay for every step. The casualties were catastrophic. In one day, we lost more men than in any previous day of the battle. They were falling faster than I could treat them, faster than I could even reach them. The screams for Doc were constant, overlapping everywhere. I worked until I couldn't think, couldn't feel, couldn't process anything except wound, treatment, move to next. Wound, treatment, move to next. Over and over, like a machine, like something that wasn't human anymore. just performing functions, just going through motions while men died around me. There was a sergeant, Staff Sergeant Thompson, squad leader, been in country for 10 months, who got hit by an RPG, shrapnel through his abdomen and legs, multiple wounds, massive trauma. He needed a surgeon, a hospital. He needed things I couldn't give him. I did what I could. Bandaged the wounds, gave him morphine, my last syringe, gave him plasma, also my last. Tried to stabilize him, but he was bleeding internally. I could see it, could see he was dying, could see there was nothing I could do. "Doc," he said, "am I going to make it?" I wanted to lie, wanted to give him hope, but I was too tired, too broken, too empty. "I don't know, Sergeant. I'm trying. I'm doing everything I can." "I know you are, Doc. You always do." He grabbed my hand. "Tell my wife. Tell her I love her. Tell her I tried." "You're going to tell her yourself, Sergeant. You're going to make it." But we both knew I was lying. He died about 20 minutes later. Held my hand the whole time, thanking me, telling me it wasn't my fault, telling me I'd done good work, forgiving me for failing him. I had nothing left. No supplies, no morphine, no bandages, no plasma, nothing. Just my hands. Just whatever I could improvise. Just the knowledge that I couldn't save anyone else, that anyone else who got hit would die, because I had nothing left to give them. But the fighting continued. The Marines kept pushing, kept taking casualties, and I kept responding when they called, kept trying with nothing, kept failing over and over while they died. By February 25th, we'd taken most of the Citadel. The NVA was collapsing, pulling back. The end was near. One more day, maybe 2. Then it would be over. Then we could leave this cursed city. Then the survivors could try to become human again. But that last day was the worst. The NVA fought hardest when they knew they were finished, made their last stand, took as many of us with them as they could. The casualties on that final day were terrible. So many Marines falling, so many dying, so many I couldn't save. A young private, PFC Jackson, 18 years old, been in country for 3 weeks. He got hit by machine gun fire. Multiple rounds through the chest. He was screaming for me, screaming for his mother, screaming in pain and fear and the knowledge that he was dying. I reached him, looked at his wounds, knew immediately he was gone. No way to save him. Too much damage. But he was looking at me, eyes begging me to help, to save him, to make it stop. I had no morphine, nothing for the pain, nothing except my hands. I held him, told him lies about how he'd be okay, how we'd get him out, how he'd go home, while he died, while he screamed, while I failed him one last time. When he stopped breathing, I closed his eyes, moved to the next. Because there was always a next, always another wounded Marine, always another failure waiting. On February 26, 1968, we took the Citadel, took the flag down, raised ours, declared Hugh City secured, declared victory, declared the battle over. 26 days of fighting, 26 days of casualties, 26 days of urban combat that destroyed everyone involved. The Marines had lost over 140 killed, over 850 wounded. The NVA lost thousands. The city lost everything. We'd won, officially. We'd taken Hugh. We'd completed the mission. We'd done what we were ordered to do. But it didn't feel like victory. Just felt like survival, like we'd outlasted them. Like we'd paid a price so high that winning meant nothing. And I'd been there for all of it. 26 days of trying to save men I couldn't save. 26 days of failing. 26 days of carrying weight I'd never put down. After Hugh fell, they pulled us out, sent us to the rear for rest and refit, replace casualties, get new equipment, recover before the next operation. The Marines who'd survived, maybe half the unit that went in, We were hollow, empty, destroyed by what we'd been through. I'd been a corpsman for 4 months, felt like 40 years. 4 months in Vietnam, 3 weeks in Hughes City, 3 weeks that aged me in ways that couldn't be measured in time. 3 weeks that took whatever optimism or innocence I'd had and ground it into the rubble of that cursed city. They gave me a Bronze Star for valor, for treating wounded under fire, for doing my job in the worst conditions imaginable. I didn't want it, didn't feel like I deserved it. All I'd done was fail, over and over. Watch men die despite my best efforts, carry the weight of every face I couldn't save. But they pinned it on anyway, took a picture, sent it home to my parents, made me into a hero when all I felt like was a failure. The other corpsmen who'd survived Hugh, there were 3 of us left out of 7 who went in, we didn't talk about it. Couldn't talk about it. What was there to say? We'd all been there, all seen the same things, all failed in the same ways, all carried the same weight. We just existed in shared silence, understanding that we were changed, broken, that we'd never be who we were before Hugh, that some part of us had died in that city along with all the Marines we couldn't save. They gave me 2 weeks of rear duty, time to recover, time to rest, time to process. But there was no processing it, no making sense of it, no understanding what it all meant. Just the faces, the screams, the endless stream of wounded and dying that I couldn't stop. The nightmares started immediately. Every night, back in Hugh, back treating wounded Marines, back watching them die, back failing them, waking up reaching for medical supplies that weren't there, waking up to screams that were just echoes, waking up in the rear but still trapped in Hugh. After 2 weeks, they sent me back to a line unit, different battalion. New Marines who hadn't been at Hugh, who didn't know what it was like, who looked at my Bronze Star and thought I was experienced, competent, someone who could save them. I wanted to tell them the truth, that I'd failed them too, that corpsmen can't save everyone, that sometimes we can't save anyone, that the Bronze Star just meant I'd survived longer than most. But I didn't. Just took the assignment, took the responsibility, tried to do the job knowing I'd fail again. I spent the rest of 1968 in Vietnam. More operations, more casualties, more wounded Marines, more deaths, but nothing like Hugh, nothing that sustained, nothing that concentrated, just the regular horror of Vietnam, which felt almost manageable compared to what Hugh had been. I rotated home in November 1968, 13 months in country, most of it treating casualties, most of it failing to save them, most of it carrying weight that got heavier every day. I flew into Travis Air Force Base in California, processed out, got my discharge papers. They gave me my pay, gave me civilian clothes, told me I was done, told me to go home, told me to move on with my life, just like that. 13 months of war, 13 months of watching men die. And they expected me to just go home and be normal, be a civilian, forget about it, and move forward. I took a bus to Los Angeles, arrived at the station in uniform, thought maybe someone would care, thought maybe there'd be some acknowledgement, some recognition. But this was 1968, anti-war protests, political division. Nobody wanted to see veterans. Nobody wanted to be reminded of Vietnam. I got spit on at the bus station. A woman saw my uniform and spit on me, called me a baby killer, told me I was a disgrace. Others just looked away, pretended I didn't exist, made it clear that Vietnam veterans weren't welcome, weren't heroes, weren't wanted. I changed out of my uniform in a gas station bathroom, threw it in the trash, never wore it again. Decided right then that I wouldn't talk about being a veteran, wouldn't talk about Vietnam, wouldn't talk about Hugh, would just try to disappear, to blend in, to pretend the last 13 months hadn't happened. My family welcomed me home, my parents, my siblings. They were happy to see me, relieved I'd survived. But they didn't understand, couldn't understand. I'd try to explain and the words wouldn't come. Or they'd come and sound insane. How do you explain, Hugh? How do you explain 26 days of urban combat? How do you explain watching young men die while you failed to save them? So I stopped trying. Just said it was hard. Said I was glad to be home. Said I wanted to move on. All lies, all pretending. All the beginning of a lifetime of hiding what Vietnam had done to me. I couldn't sleep. The nightmares were constant. Every night in Hue. Every night treating wounded Marines. Every night watching them die. Every night failing them again. I'd wake up screaming, reaching for medical supplies, trying to save men who weren't there. My family would find me on the floor, disoriented, confused, lost between 1968 and 1969, between Los Angeles and Hue City. I tried to go to college, used the GI Bill, thought maybe education would give me purpose, direction, a way forward. Enrolled in community college. Lasted one semester. Couldn't focus. Couldn't sit in classrooms full of kids who'd never been to war, who protested the war, who had no idea what it cost. I'd sit there while they talked about Vietnam, about how immoral it was, about how veterans were war criminals, about how we should all be ashamed, and I'd say nothing. Just sit there, carrying the weight of Hue, carrying the faces of Marines who died, carrying the knowledge that I'd done my best and it hadn't been enough. I dropped out, got a job in a warehouse, night shift. Didn't have to interact with people much. Could just work, move boxes, try not to think, try not to remember, try to exist without falling apart completely. But I was falling apart. Slowly, piece by piece, the nightmares, the flashbacks, the inability to connect with anyone, the weight of carrying Hue everywhere I went. It was destroying me, making me into something less than human, something that functioned but didn't live. It's 1973 now, 5 years since Hue City, 5 years since I came home. I'm 26 years old and I feel ancient. Feel like I died in Hue and what came back was just a shell. Just something going through motions, just a ghost pretending to be alive. I still work at the warehouse, night shift, same job, same routine. Wake up, work, come home, try to sleep, fail, repeat. 5 years of the same cycle, 5 years of just existing, never living, never moving forward, just surviving. Like I learned to do in Vietnam, I never married, never had kids, never built anything resembling a normal life. How could I? How could I inflict myself on someone else? How could I explain the nightmares, the flashbacks, the moments when I'm not really here because I'm back in Hue, back watching Marines die, back failing them? The nightmares never stopped. Every single night, still in Hue, still treating wounded, still watching them die, still hearing them call for me. Doc, Doc, still running toward them, still failing to save them, waking up with their faces burned into my mind, their screams echoing in my head. I see other Vietnam veterans sometimes at the VA around town. We recognize each other, something in the eyes, something that marks us as different, as broken, as forever changed by a war nobody wants to remember. We don't talk much. What's there to say? We all carry our own hells, our own faces, our own failures. My Hue is their A. Shao Valley, or Khe San, or Hamburger Hill. Different places, same horror, same weight. The war ended this year. Paris Peace Accords signed in January. American troops pulling out. POWs coming home. Everyone declaring it over. Declaring we can move on now. Declaring the war is history. But it's not over. Not for us. Not for the men who fought it. Not for the corpsmen who couldn't save them. The war lives in us, in our nightmares, in our flashbacks, In every moment, we're haunted by faces of men we failed to save. I tried therapy once. VA hospital. Group therapy with other veterans. We'd sit in a circle and try to talk about it, try to make sense of it, try to find some way to carry it that didn't destroy us. One guy, Army medic, who'd been at Ia Drang, he said something that stuck with me. The worst part isn't what they did to us. It's what we couldn't do for them. Every man who died while I was working on him, that's what I carry. Not the fear, not the horror, the failures, the faces of men I couldn't save. Everyone in that room nodded. We all carried the same thing. Not the combat, not the danger, the helplessness, the inability to save them, the knowledge that our best wasn't enough, that we'd failed the men who depended on us. The therapist asked if I felt responsible for their deaths, if I blamed myself. I didn't know how to answer. Was I responsible? I'd done my best, used every skill I had, every bit of training, every ounce of strength. But they died anyway. So many of them died anyway. Maybe I wasn't responsible. But I felt responsible. Felt like I should have done more, been better, tried harder, saved more of them. The rational part knew that was impossible, that some wounds can't be treated in the field, that sometimes there's nothing anyone could do. But the emotional part didn't care about rational. It just carried the weight, carried every face, carried every failure. I stopped going to therapy. Didn't help. Couldn't change what happened. Couldn't bring back the dead. Couldn't make the nightmares stop. Just made me relive it all. Made me say it out loud. Made it worse. I think about the Marines I saved sometimes. Wonder where they are now. Wonder if they made it home okay. Wonder if they're as broken as I am, or if they somehow adjusted better. Wonder if saving them meant anything. If it was worth the cost of carrying all the ones I couldn't save. Rodriguez, the kid with the chest wound I'd sealed with a magazine pouch, I got a letter from him in 1970. He'd survived, went home, got married, had a kid, thanked me for saving his life, said he thought about me every day, said he'd never forget what I did for him. I read that letter and felt nothing. Should have felt proud, should have felt like it mattered, should have felt like saving him was worth something. But all I could feel was the weight of all the others, Thompson, Jackson, Wilson, Stevens, all the faces I couldn't save, all the failures that outweighed any success. You can't outrun a bullet, but you try anyway. That's what being a combat medic taught me. You run toward the wounded knowing you probably can't save them, knowing you'll likely fail, knowing you'll carry their faces forever, but you run anyway, because they're calling for you, because they need you, because it's what you do. In Hughes City, I ran toward bullets for 26 days. 26 days of trying to save Marines I couldn't save. 26 days of failing over and over. 26 days that destroyed whatever person I used to be and left behind this hollow thing that goes through motions but doesn't live. I'm 26 years old. Been home 5 years. And I'm still in Hugh. Still treating wounded Marines. Still watching them die. Still hearing them call for me. Still running toward gunfire, even though I'm standing in a warehouse in Los Angeles. Still trying to save men who are already dead. Still failing, always failing. They gave me a Bronze Star, said I was a hero, said I saved lives under fire, said I did my job in impossible conditions. But all I remember are the failures. All I carry are the faces of men I couldn't save. All I hear are their last words, their screams, their calls for help that I couldn't answer. The war is over. The news says so. The politicians say so. Everyone says it's time to move on, to heal, to forget. But I can't forget, can't move on, can't heal from wounds that never stop bleeding. I'll carry Hughes City for the rest of my life. Carry every face, every failure, every scream, every moment I wasn't enough, every Marine who died calling for me, every second of those 26 days that destroyed me. You can't outrun a bullet, and you can't outrun the memories, can't outrun the faces, can't outrun the guilt of surviving when they didn't, can't outrun the knowledge that you failed them, that your best wasn't enough, that they died anyway. So you stop running, stop trying to escape, just carry it, day after day, year after year, until maybe, eventually, you can put it down, or more likely, until it finally crushes you completely. That's what Hugh City taught me. That's what being a combat medic taught me. That's what 5 years of carrying it has taught me. You don't recover. You don't heal. You don't move on. You just carry it. Forever. Until you can't carry it anymore. And I'm still carrying it. We'll always be carrying it. We'll always be in Hugh City. Always running toward gunfire. Always trying to save men I can't save. Always failing. Always remembering. Always haunted. Always in Hugh.